what they call the cradle of civilization. They reckon the earliest people were in this area here, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. They reckon traditionally that the site of Eden was around near Mesopotamia area. There's a garden in the land of Eden, so the land of Eden potentially could have been a lot bigger than the garden. Euphrates River, Tigris River, mountains of Ararat. I think Ararat means cursed. The boat ended up there. Abraham gets called by God, leaves the place of Ur of the Chaldeans. Chaldeans were a later people group, but they lived here. Ur of the Chaldeans. They left the area. Abraham and his family went up into Haran, is around here, I think, and then later on went down into Canaan. Eventually went back and forth to Egypt, and then the Israelites kind of in their history went back and forth to Egypt a bit. And here is Israel, and here, surrounded by Moab and Edom and Phoenicia and Tyre and Sidon up here, and Syria here, and down here Philistia, which later would be called Palestine by the Greeks. And then up here we've got Syria, and up here is modern day Iraq, and down here is modern day Iran. And so this is the world we're looking at. I could have just gone to the next screen. Here we go. King of Tyre, you might remember him from the story of Solomon, where he gets the cedar trees. They're up here, Phoenicians. And this is where we're talking about Babylon, and then below Babylon, city of Ur. And Assyria's up here. Mount Sinai's down here. So they went down the inconvenient route down to the mountain, did all their interactions with God and powerful moments, and then back up into Canaan, into the promised land. The area we're going to look at a little bit today, and we're going to talk about some tablets that showed up around this area in Phoenicia in a place called Ugarit, and we're going to explore what those say. Now, this is a map of archaeology sites, and so some of the earliest archaeology sites are sort of along this Fertile Crescent area in the ancient Near East. These are cuneiform tablets, and we talked a little bit about this in the last couple of weeks and spent too much time on it. Cuneiform, or cuneiform, I want to say it. It's basically made with the reed stylus, so they just chop a reed, let it go hard, and they'd press it into soft clay, and that's how they designed writing. It started off more basic and eventually became more and more complicated. A lot of these tablets that they've found at these sites are really small. You can hold them in the palm of your hand and just tell your story, pressing the reed stylus into clay, lit harder than the sun, and it will last thousands of years apparently. So amazing. These tablets, once they cracked the code with the Rosetta Stone, was a real game changer. Because they could get inside the minds and the world of ancient civilizations which they never knew anything about, and they could start to read the stories. A few weeks ago we read about Babylon, Epic of Gilgamesh, and we read about the Numenor Elish, and we learned those stories, and they were written on cuneiform. And so it wasn't until they could translate this and figure out what the heck it's saying that they would even know what those people groups thought. So we talked about the Babylonians, and we talked a little bit about Marduk killing Tiamat and splitting the snaky fish, and putting part of the snaky fish up here, and that became the sky, and part of the snaky fish down below. And that was their way of seeing the world as a mix between natural and supernatural. It was their way of perceiving reality, that they would give kind of spiritual names to elements. And many ancient cultures and many indigenous cultures have done this, where we look at the sea, we will look at the sky, we look at the forest, we look at the land, and they give names and beings and stories to these things. And this was common in Egyptian culture and Babylonian culture, where the sky would be a goddess or a god or a being, a deity. The land would be a deity. The air that's holding up and keeping the area separate would be seen as a deity. And we talked about what was different around the Bible and around Genesis, and how the Bible is different, where instead of everything being a God and everything being a spirit, we talk about that there is one great creator God, and he commands all of the natural elements under him. He is supreme over it all, and he speaks and everything responds to him. And so this is I won't spend too much time on it. So here's a little video that didn't make the cut a couple of weeks ago. Basically just touches on some of the things that we're talking about. This is a university in Israel, by the way.
So far, we have discussed the parallels between Genesis 1 and Enuma Elish. So many differences, which outweigh the similarities. The differences deserve attention too. In fact, several scholars believed that in comparative study, the dissimilarities are no less important than the similarities. Differences may teach us a lot about the nature of the two cultures and their religious conceptions. A leading scholar who believed in highlighting the differences between biblical and extra-biblical texts was Umberto Cassuto. Cassuto believed that the comparative study can reveal the unique ideas of biblical religion and its innovations vis-a-vis other religions. I recommend his commentary on the book of Genesis, chapter 1 through 11. These chapters are rich in parallels to the ancient Near East. Cassuto regards these parallels as a foundation for discussing the differences between the traditions. He begins his commentary on the story of creation with these words.
The purpose of the Torah in this section is to teach us that the whole world and all that it contains were created by the word of the one God, according to his will, which operates without restraint. It is thus opposed to the concepts current among the peoples of the ancient East, who were Israel's neighbors. And in some respects, it is also in conflict with certain ideas that had already found their way into the ranks of our people. The language, however, is tranquil, undisturbed by polemic of dispute. The controversial note is heard indirectly, as it were, through the deliberate, quiet utterances of Scripture, which sets the opposing views at naught by silence or by subtle hint.
This is one of the clearest formulations of the research school represented by Cassuto. Let's follow Cassuto's path and try to analyze the differences between the creation stories. The most striking difference regards the nature of the gods. Enuma Elish teaches us that in the beginning there was a mating of two deities. The result was the birth of successive generations of younger gods who soon began to fight their ancestors. This fact alone is very telling regarding the Mesopotamian conceptions of the divine. The gods are basically part of the natural world. They can be born and give birth. They can be involved in fights and get killed. Some of them are stronger than others. Often they are identified with elements of nature such as the sea. In contrast, the biblical God stands above nature and has no history or genealogy. This is why the story of the deity's battle with the ancient sea is absent from Genesis 1, although it is not entirely absent from the Bible, as we will see later. God is portrayed as a single sovereign ruler. He has no rival during or after creation. According to Genesis 1, there are almost no divine entities in the world besides God. This is why the biblical creation account has to retell the story of the splitting of Tiamat's body. In Enuma Elish, the body of a dead mythological monster is divided. In the Bible, the object that is separated is simply water, a neutral, inanimate element. The biblical waters are completely subordinate to the will of God, and the sea has no independent power to rebel against him. This process of removing mythological qualities for religious purposes is sometimes called demythologization. On the course website, you will find some good recommendations for extra reading about the relation between Genesis 1 and Enoma Elish.
Cool. So that was our week on Babylon, where we talked about comparing. Now this is another video. This one's by the Bible Project. This one looks at as part of our recapping. This one looks at the Garden of Eden story and compares it and talks about temple worship. So this one's quite interesting about how part of this story is a reflection on people being and functioning as priests in the presence of God. And so look out for that comparison as we watch. Oh, sorry, wrong video. Oh, right video. Yeah.
So what about Genesis chapter 2, this second creation account, which is distinctive from the creation account in chapter 1. It has a different structure. It has a different chronology. Does it report the same event in a different way, or does it somehow report two different events? I would argue that it does indeed report the same event through a different lens. Whereas Genesis 1 is answering the question, who's in charge here? Who is God? How does he relate to humanity, and how does humanity relate to the created order? I think Genesis 2 is focused on a different issue, and much of that issue is what is the nature of humanity? And although the account could be described as folkloric by some, or anthropomorphic for sure, the idea that God is exhibiting human characteristics and that he plants a garden, he builds a human, and in some ways it's a much more tangible account. I do indeed think it is simply a separate lens on the same event. So what is that lens? Well, in some ways, I'll have to take you back into the literary realities of the ancient Near East. There is a scholar who has recently published something that has come to be known as the Mispeh ritual, the Mesopotamian animation ritual. Michael Dick is associated with this material, a woman named Catherine McDowell as well. And this material teaches us that in the ancient Mesopotamian world, so in Babylonia, in Assyria, the ancients believed that they could animate their idols. Dialing this back another step, we know that the citizens of Mesopotamia worshipped statues, or at least it looks to us that they worship statues. In reality, what they did is they incarnated their deities. And I'm using that language on purpose. They created beautiful, perfect works of art to represent their deities in real space and time. And they had very elaborate rituals that surrounded the creation and animation of these statues. And the rituals involved highly expert craftsmen who would form the statues and cover them in silver and gold and embed them with jewels. But when the statue was complete, the ritual involved taking that statue, that incarnation of their deity, to a sacred garden. And the priests and the artisans would place the statue in that sacred garden, and then they would go home. And when they came back the next morning at dawn, they would celebrate in ritual fashion, behold, the gods have given us a deity. They have given us a tselem, an image of themselves. And the ritual fiction was that this statue had been birthed in the sacred garden. And then they would, through ritual fashion, they would animate the statue. And they would do so by washing out its eyes and washing out its mouth. That's where the phrase mispeh comes from, the washing of the mouth. As you would cleanse a baby birthed by sucking the mucus out of their mouth and eyes, so too they would wash the fictional mucus out of the mouth and eyes of the deity. Once this deity was therefore animate, they would take the deity and install him or her in the temple precinct. And then the craftsmen would ritually cut off their hands, declaring they had never touched the statue, and all of the tools that were necessary for the creation of that particular image would be placed inside a sacrificed sheep, and the sheep would be thrown in the sacred river, and all memory that this piece had ever been crafted by human hands would be washed away. Why? Because even the ancients knew that humans should not be making gods. Gods should be making humans. Well, take that ancient literature and apply it to Genesis chapter 2. So the Almighty plants a garden in the east, may I even say a sacred garden, and then he crafts with his hands, the verb yatsar, the same verb that would be used for a professional artisan. He crafts with his hands an image, a human. And in Genesis 1, we learn that human is spoken of as a tselem, an image. God crafts an image of himself, and then he breathes the breath of life into this creature. In other words, he animates him. And once he animates him, he installs him. That's the verb. He installs him in the sacred garden, which also happens to be the dwelling place of God and humanity, i.e., the great cosmic temple. And then the garden is populated with cosmic rivers and cosmic trees. And then a partner is crafted for the human. And this partner becomes his soulmate, his helper, the one who will walk through life with him. Is Genesis chapter 2 a children's tale, or is it a highly sophisticated critique? A highly sophisticated critique targeted at Israel's neighbors. You see, it is not humans who should be making gods. It is gods who should be making humans. Our God has indeed created his image, his idol, his tselem, his reflection. And that image is you and me. Animated and installed in his cosmic garden, we have been appointed as the stewards of the universe. A different theological lens on the same historic fact. God has created, and he's created us, and he's installed us in his perfect cosmos to lead and to direct in submission to his sovereignty.
It's pretty full on, eh?
Very interesting.
You guys are good with that?
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting, eh? Amazing. But image of God, we're created in the image of God, the likeness of God. There's some really good Bible Project videos on that Image of God series, if you want to kind of watch their take on it as well. And if you watch Bible Project videos after you've watched that, things will click because you'll have that fresh in your mind as well. Okay, so last week we talked about Egypt. We just had a few thoughts on Egypt. Egyptian spiritual beliefs evolved over time. The time span of Egypt was like 3,000 years. So it changed. Number two, many deities were an interpretation of natural phenomena, similar to a lot of other ancient cultures. They looked at the world that they could see. They looked at the forces, the powerful forces at play, the storm rolling in from the horizon, the sea, washing up, and the floods coming, and all these different things. And they thought, what's behind this? What is the power, the energy that is behind the world? And so that in some ways, deities were often an interpretation of what they could see and what they're experiencing. Of course, there is a spiritual aspect to many of these deities as well. Number three, many deities were local to cities. And so the cities, especially of Thebes and Memphis, often had quite different deities, and kings and cities promoted their deities as the greatest, and so they would kind of have different legends and stories in Thebes about the god there being the creator god, and then there was a story in Memphis about their god creating that god, and so you had a bit of a rivalry happening. And you've got massive pharaohs being built, probably by slaves and chiseled out of stone. You can see all the people here walking beside it. Huge, powerful kingdom. We looked at, in a cool artistic rendering of what Memphis may have looked like. And this would have been the capital city where Moses approached Pharaoh very timidly as he walked up those steps, I'm sure. Huge, powerful kingdoms. And with their own ideas of God. We talked a little bit last week about the Apis bull. About the low-res image. And the doctor, I can't remember, she mentioned some of the rituals that they would do around these incarnations. So the bull in Egypt, the bull was believed to be a incarnation of Ptah, which was their creator god. And so the bull was like Ptah on earth in the Egyptian mind. And they would do these big rituals around the special bull, and they would parade the bull, and they'd do these things to the bull, and then the bull had its own like temple and lots of female she cows to enjoy life with. And so they were big fans of the bull. And we talked about last week how the Israelites, they took these understandings with them when they left, and they ended up misunderstanding Yahweh, misunderstanding God, and thinking, it actually says in Exodus, and we read this last week, they said, tomorrow we'll worship Yahweh. So they built the thing, and they said, tomorrow we'll wake up and we'll worship Yahweh. In a similar way that we just heard the doctor say, we create the thing, we go to sleep, we come back and we go, oh, wow, there it is. God's turned up. God's made us an image of himself. So tomorrow we'll rise and we'll worship Yahweh. And Yahweh has, of course, revealed himself in this bull. And so they're actually misunderstanding how to worship God and putting it through their lens and turning it into idol worship. And the point was that Israel was called to know God, to interact with God himself, and not have this idol like the other nations. Right, so we'll watch a video by this guy, and then we'll get into tonight's. This is Dr. Michael Heiser.
There are some terms that we should sort of camp on just a little bit. One of those is Elohim. A biblical writer will actually use Elohim of God, the God of the Bible, and lots of lesser beings. Okay, the gods of the nations. Psalm 82, the members of God's council, his entourage, the heavenly host. It will use Elohim of the disembodied dead in 1 Samuel 28. It will use Elohim of the Shadim in Deuteronomy 32:17, again, which usually gets translated demons, but really is a territorial entity. But however we understand that, it's not the God of Israel. It's something lower, but it's still Elohim. And the reason why that's okay for a biblical writer to do is that Elohim is just a term you would use as a label on anything that by nature is a disembodied member of the spiritual world, good or evil. It's just, if you're a disembodied entity and your natural estate is the spiritual world now, you're an Elohim. An ancient person would build an idol, okay, stone, wood, whatever it is. And they're not idiots. They know that they just built that thing. The idea wasn't that this is my deity and then it just dies there. The idea is that I will build this object as a home for a spiritual entity. They would do ceremonies on the idol, like the opening of the mouth. Because opening of the mouth, that means it's alive because it takes in breath and all that kind of stuff, just like someone who's breathing is alive. Well, they would transfer that thinking to this object. They would perform some ritual with the idea that when we open the mouth, the entity, the spirit entity, will come and inhabit the object or attach itself to the object. That's why in ancient texts, when idols were destroyed, people aren't thinking, oh, my God's dead now. No, they're thinking, man, when I get home, I got to build another one. And then apologize for letting that happen to the first house, and then do the ritual again, and then the deity will come back and reside with me, or in this temple, or whatever it is. So there's a connection, there's a direct connection between idols and Elohim, gods, in the ancient world. They're not, separable things in that one is real and the other isn't. The whole reason you created an idol was to get this real entity to attach itself to it and be with you so that you can barter with it. This is the essence of polytheism. You placate the gods. You believe that you need them on your side to live a good life.
All right, so tonight's theme, out of darkness. So this is the Jordan wilderness in the background there. So Israelites may have passed through something like that. Very rugged, mountainous, dead terrain. Scary place to be. We're going to be looking at basically our journey so far. We looked on the map before. We were Abraham was down in Ur, and then he came up, and then he went to Egypt, came back, settled, and then Joseph went down to Egypt, and then they multiplied and became a big slave nation, and then all of them came back out, and they crossed the Red Sea, or some people say Sea of Reeds is a better translation, but still they crossed the sea, the waters parted, and then they came down to Sinai, and they met with God as a nation. And so last week we kind of looked at the waters parting and the birth of the nation out of out of Egypt. And here we're going to look at a little bit of the journey through the wilderness and into Canaan. And so we're going to be looking at that worldview of Canaan and some of their experience of the world around them in that place. Okay, so that's why we're doing Out of Darkness. And I was going to say Out of Canaan, but I mean, it doesn't really work because I lived in Canaan. So, but it's very much looking at some of the sort of ancient spirituality that was not good. So, just got some questions to ponder for a group here. So I want you guys to think about this. What evidence of demonic activity and or exorcisms do we see in the Old Testament? Just rack your brains for a minute. Has anyone got any thoughts or ideas?
Gideon, at the end of the story of Gideon, he built himself a golden idol in the village worshiper.
Yeah. So like idol worship. Yeah.
King Saul ringing up witches.
Yeah. King Saul ringing up witches. Yep. Necromancy and
Waiting on Samuel.
yeah. Brings up Samuel.
Yeah.
Brings up actual Samuel. Yeah.
What are you doing?
What are you disturbing me for? I'm trying to sleep. Yeah. Fascinating story.
And then it came to when Abraham and when he went to Haggai, there was the Muslim world, and then there was a Christian world when we went to Rebecca.
Became the founding founding father of that group of people. Any other specifically demons and exorcism and demon possession? Is there anything like that you can think of in the Old Testament? Nothing? Interesting, eh? Interesting to think about. So the terms angels and demons came from the Greek translation of the Bible, which is 300 years before Christ. Before that point, it was more, as we saw Michael Heiser explain, the Elohim. So it's not that they didn't exist, or it's not that they made them up. It's just that the terms they used to describe these things were different. And so it's hard to see how it intersects, because in the pre-Septuagint, it is the spirit, the spirit of this, the spirit of that, or the idol, or this or that. And there's always different spirits, right? And God's still God, and they're still spirits. And there's this maybe levels of power and authority and territories and all that sort of stuff. But it's not as clear cut as angels and demons in the Old Testament. It's only once we get to the Septuagint and then we get into Jesus' ministry where it's very clear. All of a sudden, Jesus shows up on the scene and casting out devils left, right, and center. And it's a huge part of his ministry. Massive, significant part of his ministry is his authority over demons. So,
healings we're casting out.
lots of healings. And okay, so we're going to just look at and explore some different examples of spirituality, and probably call it like bad spirituality, in the neighboring nations that basically archaeologists have found in cuneiform tablets and papyrus. Okay, so the first one, actually, what have we got here? I'll follow these. Okay, Ephesians 6:12. We've read this a few times, but let's just check it again. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against authorities, against powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. In the New Testament time, Paul was very, very aware of this, and this was very common knowledge. There's a whole bunch going on that we don't see, we don't really understand, but there's a whole bunch going on. And we're struggling against these spiritual forces. All right, Deuteronomy 18. When you come into the land that the Lord God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. Okay, so from right here, there's biblical evidences that there's practices of the nations which are bad, and he's saying, do not do that stuff, stay far away. Verse 10, there shall be not found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering. Hectic, yeah. Anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer or a charmer or a medium or a necromancer or one who inquires of the dead. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving them out before you. Because of those abominations. That's why he's pushing them out. Verse 13, you shall be blameless before the Lord your God. For these nations which you're about to dispossess, listen to fortune tellers and to diviners. But as for you, the Lord your God has not allowed you to do this. Okay, we'll stay here. And we're going to read from our notes a couple of different examples. All right, so Egyptian pottery smash. In the Middle Kingdom period, the Egyptians practiced the magical cursing of their actual or potential enemies. In the Berlin Museum... Okay, sorry, my notes are out of whack. All right, I'm going to follow the screens, not my notes. Sorry, guys. All right, Leviticus 17. Sorry. I've got some better order on the screen there. Okay, Leviticus 17 says this, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the people of Israel, and say to them, this is the thing that the Lord has commanded. If any one of the house of Israel kills an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or kills it outside the camp, and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer it as a gift to the Lord in front of the tabernacle of the Lord, blood guilt shall be imputed to that man. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among this people. So it's like that person's a murderer. So there's a big consequence for this. Now, why is there such a big consequence for killing an animal and having a feast? Well, because it's not just about that. Verse 5. This is to the end that the people of Israel may bring their sacrifices that they sacrifice in the open field, that they may bring them to the Lord, to the priest at the entrance of the tent of the meeting, and sacrifice them as sacrifices of peace offerings to the Lord. And the priest shall throw the blood on the altar of the Lord at the entrance of the tent of the meeting, and burn the fat for a pleasing aroma to the Lord. So they shall no more sacrifice their sacrifices to goat demons after whom they whore. This shall be a statute forever for them throughout their generations. What the heck? Goat demons. So they're in the wilderness. And they've got a camp. There's lots and lots of people. But beyond the camp is chaos, it's death, it's fear. They look out and they're afraid because they don't know what's out there. And so scholars talk about this potentially that basically the people are afraid of what's out there. and they're afraid of the demonic that's out there. And so this is a common practice of appeasing spirits. And you see this in lots of cultures where they're not worshipping as much as they're offering them like a leave me alone offering. Like, don't come near my house and kill my children offering. Like, just go away, please. So this is what this is. This is going to the edge of the camp and doing an offering so that the spirits out in the wilderness leave us alone. God's saying, I don't want you to do that. You don't need to appease any other spirit. I'm your protector. I'm your God. I will oversee these people. I will keep you safe. This is a very, very different approach. You do not interact with any other spirit. You do not appease any other spirit. You have no interaction. The other verse in Deuteronomy, you have no interaction. Don't talk to the dead. Don't tell fortunes. Don't do charms. Nothing. Zero. No conversation is to be had. Even though there's stuff out there and you might get curious, I don't want you to go knocking or looking. There's one place you come, and that's to the place, the house of God, the temple, and you interact with Yahweh.
So he's saying in that goat demons are real.
Yeah, some sort of weird thing here, right? It is this is like one of the only scriptures though. These what I'm showing you are some of the only scriptures that really give us an understanding in the Bible.
I think that's why like the goat is like a thing now.
Oh yeah, so a lot of the stuff from the ancient world has just evolved. So we'll see that soon. Yeah. A lot of the stuff just evolved over time. Yeah. I'll look at the end. We'll do a search at the end. Yep. Okay, so quick slight tangent here. We're going to quickly have a look at Baal, who was the Canaanite deity that many of the Israelites got caught up worshipping. You might remember King Ahab was worshipping Baal. And you have a story in 1 Kings 17:1 where it said, a prophet named Elijah. Now, you know what Elijah means? El-Yah. Yahweh is my God. So you have a prophet whose name is Yahweh is my God. And he becomes the key figure in fighting the prophets of Baal. He's the guy. Yahweh is my God. A prophet named Eliah from Tishbe in Gilead said to King Ahab, in the name of the Lord, in the name of Yahweh, the living God of Israel, whom I serve, I tell you that there will be no dew or rain for the next 2 or 3 years until I say so. Why is that significant? This is Baal. He's holding some crops because he's the fertility god, and he's holding a lightning bolt because he's the storm god, because he's the God who brings rain. Because Baal is the deity that they would believe would ride in on the clouds. And as he rides in on the clouds, he brings rain to a dry land. Rain is life. When you live in a dry land and you desperately need rain so that your crops can grow so that you don't starve. This is in Canaan, sorry. This is in the place where the Israelites live. This is essentially in Israel, right? So the neighboring places worship Baals or the Baal or this Baal, and he was the storm and rain god. There's Psalms that you might stumble on one day where it talks about God, Yahweh, the Lord comes riding on the clouds, and it is a direct opposition to the way they would worship Baal, because they would say Baal rides on the clouds. And so the Israelites are saying, no, God, Yahweh rides on the clouds. Yahweh is the one who brings the rain. Yahweh is the one who brings provision. So when we're about to starve and we're panicking because we think it's going to be a drought and we're all going to die because we're an ancient agricultural population, we don't have technology or any other tricks, we're just going to die. So what do? Well, we get desperate, and someone down the road worships a rain god. Well, we need rain, so I'll go worship that god. That's the world we're in. But Yahweh is saying, do not worship that God. He's not going to bring you rain. I will bring you rain. You are my people. You come under my protection, my provision. I will bring you the stuff you need. So this is in the I think it's in the Louvre. So it's real. That's a real ancient statue of Baal. Okay, here we go. This is a Bible Project video.
So we've been learning about spiritual beings in the Bible, and I still have a lot of questions about the bad ones.
Well, great. Let's talk about the Satan and demons in the story of the Bible. So let's start in the beginning. In Genesis 1, God creates a beautiful, ordered reality out of darkness and disorder so that life can flourish. He appoints humans as his representatives to rule over all of it, and 7 times God calls it good.
Yeah, I experience that kind of goodness often in the world, in things like beauty and truth, love and generosity.
But in Genesis 3, we meet a creature who's in a state of rebellion against his creator. We're not told yet why or how he rebels, but he's on a mission to ruin God's good world for other creatures.
This thing is trouble.
Yeah, this creature is the Bible's first portrait of evil. It distorts what God has purposed for good, ruining and dragging creation back into darkness and disorder.
So the humans join the spiritual rebel, which leads them back into chaos and death.
And from this point on, the human rebellion is interwoven with a spiritual rebellion. And the biblical story shows how this happens over and over again.
Okay, but wait, we're getting all this from a slithering snake?
Well, there are clues in the story that it's more than just a snake. Remember, Eden is a high place where the earth and its creatures overlap with heaven and its creatures.
So this snake could be a spiritual being.
Well, Genesis 3 points in that direction, and then later biblical authors fill in the picture. Like when the prophet Isaiah has a vision of God's heavenly throne room, he's surrounded and being praised by the spiritual beings.
Yeah, these are the cherubim around God's throne.
But when Isaiah sees these creatures, he describes them as seraphim, which in Hebrew means snake.
Ah, so the snake is like a former staff member in God's throne room. So why is he talking to the humans?
Well, the prophet Ezekiel understood this figure as a spiritual rebel who didn't want to live under God's wisdom and authority. He wanted to be God.
Oh, right. That's the same temptation the snake puts before Adam and Eve.
Exactly. He says they could rule the world like God, but by their own wisdom.
So they're all kicked out of the garden.
Yeah, God says this rebel will now crawl on its belly.
Where does it go after this?
Well, the biblical authors offer subtle clues where this being is at work behind the scenes, animating division and hatred between humans. They also use a variety of images to describe this being. It's a snake, or a sea dragon, or a dark desert creature, or the king of death in the grave. He's also given many titles, like Tempter, or the Evil One, or the Devil, which in Greek means the slanderer.
But his name is Satan, right?
Actually, no. Satan is not a name. It's another one of these titles, which is why in Hebrew it has the word the in front of it. The Satan means the adversary, because he isn't for anything, rather he's anti-everything, working through lies to drag us back into darkness and disorder.
That's intense. Now, what about these other spiritual rebels in the Bible called demons? What are they all about?
Okay, so remember the concept of God's heavenly staff team, the divine council, or the sons of God. In the Hebrew scriptures, we're told that some of these rebelled too.
When did that happen?
Multiple times, actually. After the snake comes the rebellion of the sons of God in Genesis 6. We're told that they have sex with women who then give birth to violent warrior giants.
Oh, right. The Nephilim. These are probably the strangest characters in the whole Bible.
Well, strange from your point of view. But ancient readers knew exactly what was going on. The ancient kingdoms around Israel claimed to be founded and protected by giant warrior kings who were part human, part God, and filled with divine wisdom.
Ah, I see. So the biblical authors are saying, hey, those warrior kings, they shouldn't be honored.
Right. In this story, they're portrayed as human rebels who are captive to spiritual evil, spreading their violence in God's good world.
Yeah, and one of those kings in Genesis 10 goes on to build the city of Babylon.
Yes, Nimrod, whose name sounds like the Hebrew word for rebel. And his kingdom leads to the next rebellion, where humans exalt themselves in Babylon.
But God scatters that rebellion.
And when Moses in Deuteronomy looks back at that story, he says that's the moment when God handed over the nations to worship the rebel host of heaven, the gods of money, sex, and military power. Moses is the first one to call them demons, that is, lesser spiritual beings.
So demons are spiritual forces at work behind corrupt human power structures.
Yes, but in the Bible, they also work on the personal level, animating and exploiting humanity's greed and selfishness, as well as the weakness of our mortal bodies. In the Bible, spiritual evil is at work in anything that drags God's good creation back into chaos, darkness, and death.
So this is why when Jesus arrives on the scene, he said his primary enemy is not human.
Right. Jesus and his first followers viewed all the pain and suffering in God's good world as a sign of its captivity to death and spiritual evil.
But they didn't think this was the end of the story.
Right. Jesus knew that the only way out of this cosmic ruin is to overcome evil and death itself, even if it costs him everything.
So those demons, angel demon things, didn't actually have sex with people. It was more.
You just watched a video.
Was it more like a symbol or something of demons entering?
Yeah. It's. Yeah.
They do that now.
Yeah.
Because I'm married.
Yeah. It's up to, it's kind of, I suppose it's up to interpretation.
I like that version better.
Yeah.
Apparently, a good reason that points towards the need for a flood. The name of God felt the need to destroy humans for being evil while we do it now. Before the flood, as the whole human mind had been corrupt. One translation of Noah and his generations were pure was that his own didn't have uncorrupted DNA. The only ones that were still fully human.
Yeah.
Good reason for a flood to wipe them out was not just because humans are evil, otherwise they would wipe the sun out, nonsense thing. Yeah, because they were no longer human.
Yeah, so. Yeah, I mean, the only problem with that interpretation is I don't think the story is trying to tell us that everybody had sex with demons. I think it's trying to say that because the Nephilim, in the translation it says they were the men of renown, and so in the ancient times they had, if you think of like a Hercules type character, or in the Babylonian epic it was Marduk who fought the serpent, and he's like a demigod or a semi-god. So he's like, I'm a great warrior and I have supernatural strength and I conquer gods and I conquer this and I conquer that. And so most scholars would as Tim pointed to, would link that and say that this is a Hebrew reflection on the common ancient belief that a lot of these great kings and pharaohs in the early days claimed to be like the pharaohs did. They said, I've got the power of Ra in me and that makes me supreme. In the Babylonian cities and the Akkadian cities, they would have kings that, yes, claimed to be divine. And that actually carried right up until the time of the early church with the Roman emperors, the Caesars, who would actually claim to be divine as well, to a point where they would make people worship them in temples. And so I think that a lot of people, and that may be right, but most scholars would point to that aspect of the story as it's looking at these people and these rulers that are claiming to be like gods, and they're saying, hey, that's not a good thing. That's actually a really negative thing. And and that supernatural power and that giant stuff as well. But there's a lot of different rabbit holes and around that small tiny story. I know it's a very small little paragraph, and it's like in every single Christian, when you read it, you're just like, your mind blows up. You're like, what the heck, like when you read it. And so
original translation that refers to being mingled again in the end times.
right,
There's this scripture about the clay and
yeah,
the original translation seems to refer, sounds like the mingling of humans with something that's not human again
yeah.
in the end times.
And there's a lot, yeah,
Himself says the end times will be like the days of Noah, and it doesn't spell out what it means, but the days of Noah was when humanity being mingled with.
yeah. Totally, yeah, and there's a lot of stories and testimonies of people that have had really gross sexual relations with demonic spirits and things as well. So it is definitely a thing. When we're specifically looking at through the lens of ancient Near East historical perspective, it's hard to say. If we're looking in the perspective of current day experience, for sure, there's all sorts of gross demonic entities doing things like that. Yeah. 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 So I haven't prepared anything on Nephilim, sorry. So I'm not very well geared to answer many questions, but we'll keep having a look at this general scope. What we're going to do now is we're just going to, if you imagine Israel, so you got the sea, and you imagine, it's not like that. You imagine kind of Israel here, and surrounded by nations, all these different people groups, and there's all these different idols and religions and worship going on. And so we're going to look. She back? Yep. It just got bored with me, I think. It's like, oh. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, so in Egypt, so this is an example from Egypt, okay? So they came from Egypt. This is something that happened in Egypt. In Egypt, in the Middle Kingdom period, the Egyptians practiced the magical cursing of their actual or potential enemies as they smashed pottery, so they thought to break the power of the enemies. This is one of the pottery fragments that they found, and it's in a museum, and they've translated it. And so they found hundreds of these pottery fragments, and so scholars sort of look, and archaeologists decided, they did this as a practice where they'd write down something on a pot and then they'd smash it, and they thought that doing that action was breaking the power. So it could be against a foreign invader, and so they'd get a whole bunch of them together and they write, our enemy that's threatening us, smash, break the power. Or it could be more specific thing. This is interesting. On pottery fragment 1, every evil word, every evil speech, every evil slander, every evil thought, every evil plot, every evil fight, every evil quarrel, every evil plan, every evil thing, all evil dreams, and all evil slumber. Smash. Gone. Interesting, eh? It's kind of like a prophetic act, isn't it? Like, you got to get why they do that. It's quite interesting. Sorry?
Wouldn't it be nice if it like just worked?
Yeah. So this is this next one here. It's there. Okay. This is a little bit creepy. So it's just touching on witchcraft. So just a heads up. This is an ancient Hittite ritual. It was on a clay tablet that they found, thousands of years old. Some of the earliest evidence for what you'd call witchcraft showing up. I think this kind of shows that this stuff has always been around. So it's real. Yeah, it's always been around, and this is thousands of years ago. So Mesopotamia is down here, which we spent most of our time. And now the Hittites were up in here. This is like Turkey, modern day Turkey. Okay, so this is kind of where this was found. This is what it says on the clay tablet. It's a longer story, but I've just taken one little segment here. It's talking about what they call old ladies. In the Hittite culture, the doing this stuff was reserved for old lady and like a witch, what you'd imagine. Yeah. So she returns to the clay pit, deposits a broken loaf for the demons of the clay pit, and speaks as follows: "Eat ye demons of the clay pit, if you wicked sorcerer made over this man's form either to the clay pit or to the current of the river, give it back to him." By the way, this is like an incantation or a sorcery text to counteract somebody that has like a curse on them. And so if they feel like someone's cursed them, they go to this person, they like, "Help, I'll pay you money, can you rid me of this?" Right? So that's what this is. "Whatever she had taken to the open country, she carries back to the city and deposits in the city within the inner chamber at a secret spot. The old woman goes forth and assembles in front of the sun 3 pieces of bitumen, holds a bronze dagger in readiness, and also kindles a fire. She throws the water and the broken loaf into it and speaks as follows: Whatever words the sorcerer spoke, whatever he twinned together, whatever he wove, whatever he made in whatever place, those things he did not properly know, the sorcerer. He built up sorcery like a pillar, twined it together like a string. I am thwarting him. I have pushed over these words of sorcery like a pillar. I have untwined them like a string." So it's an example of an ancient use of what we'd see as witchcraft. And this was happening in the surrounding nations, okay? It's like it said in Deuteronomy 18, don't do any of this stuff, and makes a long list. All that stuff was happening. So this is a Berlin papyrus. It's in the Berlin Museum. They reckon it's from the 16th century BC, 600 years before Christ. A brief extract will serve as an example of protective magic, in this case the mother protecting her sleeping child at night. This is on the first page of the notes. Okay, this is interesting. This is kind of like a prayer. Like, if you think about this, it's like a mum is like praying this prayer to get the demons out of her kid's bedroom. You can totally empathize with this, right? It's fascinating because it's so ancient. "Mayest thou flow away, he who comes in the darkness and enters in furtively with his nose behind him and with his face reversed, failing in that for which he came. Mayest thou flow away, she who comes in the darkness and enters in furtively with her nose behind her and her face turned backwards, failing in for which she came. Hast thou come to kiss this child? I will not let thee kiss him. Hast thou come to silence him? I will not let thee set silence over him. Hast thou come to injure him? I will not let thee injure him. Have thou come to take him away? I will not let thee take him away from me." Interesting, hey? It goes on to say in your notes on this papyrus, it says that I've made your magical protection against thee out of clover. That is what sets an obstacle, what injures thee. Out of onions, out of honey sweet for men, but bitter for those who are yonder of the roe. Of a fish, out of the jawbone of a fish, out of the backbone of the bird. So it's like sort of trying everything to ward off these evil spirits.
As an ex-Wiccan, I used to do similar stuff, and I thought that I was actually praying to God.
Wow.
But since obviously becoming a Christian,
yeah,
I know that there's a demon behind.
Interesting.
Whoever I was communicating with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, thank you.
But
yeah.
Even whether you're a good witch or a bad witch, even though they're all bad,
yeah,
it would be called a spell.
It's really interesting, and it's interesting that in Deuteronomy 18, God just says you can't do any of it. It doesn't matter what your motivations are.
Yeah.
It's just like no. It's interesting, eh? And it's like this stuff can seem like okay, but yeah, God just bans it, blanket ban.
Spirits that are answering you don't have your best interest at heart.
True.
It doesn't matter who you're
Yeah,
talking to,
true.
they want to destroy you.
Yeah. It is interesting when I was, I think it may have been on the Hittite stuff, some of the Hittite material. I searched the names that came up on the pottery, and on Google search it was like a Wiccan website. And it's like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is thousands of years later. These people are...
Yeah, a lot of Wiccans, they do believe they are communicating with God, but it's their God, which is Satan, Satan's angels. So, yeah, but a lot of, some of them are aware, some of them aren't aware. Like, I wasn't aware. I actually thought I was communicating with the Creator because I was a white witch. But, yeah, no, obviously. Now that I'm...
That's probably why you met Jesus. Because your heart searched,
Yeah. But
That's
yeah,
interesting,
so...
eh?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's interesting, yeah.
Sometimes it's people's choice they deal with rather than, but it's not God's choice. We got to get into God's choice.
Amen.
God's choice alone it helps us to do.
Amen. All right, I'm going to keep moving because we're running out of time. So this next one here, this one's interesting. Okay, so this is called the Arslan-Tash amulet, dated to the 7th century before Christ, was discovered in Arslan-Tash, Syria, contains the writing of Phoenician magic incantations. Now, this is what it is. The cuneiform writing is over top of these statue pictures. Now, scholars think that these are a flying spirit, like a gross flying demon that's coming, and a wolf type demon, which is really interesting. So gross, but basically this person is like defending themselves against it, and on one side of it, it's like defend yourself against the gross spirit that comes at the night, and on this side, it's like writing certain things on it. Come on. And so this is a good example of more stuff in this period and this around Israel. So here's what it says in your notes, second page, I think. Whispering incantation against the flying one, the oath of Sassam, son of Pedostria god, and against the strangler of the lamb. The house I enter, you shall not enter. The court I tread, you shall not tread. So they would keep their livestock in the courtyard. So you would have to enter through a gate, and they think that they would actually put them at the top of the gate. So it's like as you walk through, it's like if you're fit this criteria, you're not allowed to go through the gate. It's kind of similar to like anointing your door with oil and being like, yeah, Jesus, keep the bad devils out. There's a similar idea. Similar idea to in Exodus where they killed the lamb and put blood on the door to keep the death angel out. So it's on the doorpost or on the top of the door. The house I enter, you shall not enter. The court I tread, you shall not tread. He has made an eternal contract with us. Assur made a pact with us, the sons of El, and the great council of the holy ones. Now, this is a Ugaritic clay tablet, which means it's from Canaan. It's from the same place. It's from the land. And in Canaan, they had Baal and they had El. Now, El was the idea of the creator God. He sat above the divine council. They picture him like with a grey beard in the stories of the Baal epic. And then Baal was like a warrior god. He was the storm god, and he was really violent. And you'd go out and you'd conquer lots of enemy nations, and he was a fighter. And so this was like the Canaanite people, their two main gods. They had El and they had Baal. Now, El, the best way to describe El is if you imagine like Allah, right? If you imagine Allah in the Muslim world, is a very, very similar description to the biblical God. In fact, Allah is literally just the Arabic word for God. So it's pretty much the same. And in the same way in the Bible, we've got El being used in the ancient Near East as the word for God. And so at first you might freak out and you think, flip, is this just the same guy? No, it's not. It's very different. If you read the Baal cycle, it's a very different character, very different personality. So the best way to describe it is it's like a misinterpretation or a different interpretation of God. You could say it's deception, you could say it's a demonic entity, or you could just say it's a misinterpretation of God. But in any case, he fits the same description, but he's got some very different characteristics. In the Baal epic, it talks about El, one of the goddesses comes to him and asking for help, and he responds by saying, "Does my presence arouse you?" You know, just things like that, which is like, okay, that's not the same God. That guy's gross. I don't want anything to do with him. So he's a creeper. So so he's a different God. So yeah. So if you read the biblical story of the character of God, you have a very, very different idea than the Canaanite understanding of the Creator God. But they use the same name. Just like Allah, it's the same name as God in Arabic. And if you go to Palestine, you talk to a Muslim, they're like, oh, it's God. But you know that it's not the same, right? And it's very different. You read the Quran, and the description of God in the Quran is a very different person. So Baal is his own entity, but Baal is often put up against Yahweh. So Baal is often versing Yahweh in the Bible. And so it's Yahweh versus Baal, and then Elijah, where we talked about before, was the prophet of Yahweh, defeating the prophets of Baal. Prophets of Baal, they didn't have any control over the rain, but Yahweh does.
Israel would refer to Allah as Yahweh rather than Allah.
Israel. Yeah, and it's Israel. It's, yeah.
Between Allah and Yahweh.
Yeah. So, right, sorry, I just got distracted on here. So, Asur has made a pact with us, all the sons of El, and the great council of all the holy ones, with the oath of heaven and earth, with the oath of Baal, Lord of the earth, with the oath of Horon, whose utterance is true, his 7 concubines, and the 8 wives of Baal Kudus, written around between the images. All right, here we go. Here's what it says. O flying one, from the dark room, pass away. Now, night demons. Interesting, eh? Sounds like a deliverance prayer, eh? Get out! Yep. From my house, O crushers, go away. That's written on the wolf figure here. From my house, O crushers, go away.
Who chiseled out that? Like, were the witches and sorcerers chiseled?
I have we had no idea. They just found it in the ground one day. O Sasim, let it not be opened for him, and let him not come down to the doorposts. The sun is rising for Sasim. Disappear and fly away home. Written on the axe-wielding figure. Modified from, yeah. So that's that one. So it gives you a little bit of insight into the worlds of Canaan and the world of the Old Testament. As there was very much, you could call it witchcraft, you could call it, but it's not quite, I think that if you're looking at the ancient Near East, I think it's a little more complicated than to put it in a nice tidy box of angels, demons, witchcraft. It's because that's a modern expression, so you could argue that it's the same spirits, the same evil spirits, but when you're talking about witchcraft and angels and demons, you're probably more talking about something a few thousand years later in the way that it operates or looks. When we're looking back this far back in time, you argue it's all the same stuff, but it probably looked a little bit different.
So what did people do? Like, I mean, obviously, like these people that didn't know Yahweh,
how'd they get saved?
People,
yeah, it's not fair. I know. Yeah.
Say Jesus, get out. What do people do? God wasn't in Jesus' form or whatever.
I know. Yeah. I can't answer that.
All night.
Yeah. Yeah. There are some fragments in the Dead Sea Scrolls which are like patchy exorcism prayers. So there is apocryphal stuff that alludes to exorcism. So, like Michael Heiser, that guy, will talk a little bit about this. But I think there is some evidence that there were exorcism type things in Israel. There was like a exorcism ministry or an understanding of how to defend yourself against these evil things of the night. What's interesting is that the surrounding cultures and the people of the day had a very real sense that this stuff was active and real. And so that's all I can say is that we look at the evidence and we go, okay, it's there. But unfortunately, you know, we're just digging up one clay tablet at a time and trying to translate it. That's kind of where it's at. So maybe in like 10 years we'll have more of an insight. But
just as it's interesting to me to see that wolf in that unrighteous spirit.
Yeah.
Because one time during worship, I saw that wolf in a vision.
Right.
And that wolf was attacking a sheep. And how you explained how.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was real interesting. I saw it because pastor was sick. He had like a sore throat.
Wow.
These two women believers. Oh, they're cool. They're cool. They were like speaking to her, going, "Be gone, leave, get off, go now." And I saw it as in a vision. I saw this wolf attacking a sheep.
Wow.
And these two other sheep went bang.
Cool.
Yeah,
So good.
And then I saw that and I was like, wow, who dug that up? Who chiseled it?
It's interesting. How did they know?
What I saw is what I saw.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
I saw it. They were seeing in the spirit.
Now, yeah, and no, I would say don't hear me wrong. I'm not advocating for any other spiritualities or religions here, but I would say that potentially human beings, even if they don't have the Bible, they may have experienced or seen things in the spirit. And so there may actually just be things that are true that are in these other areas, and because people are seeing it and experiencing it. It's not that it's the truth, and it's not that it's the way. I'm definitely not saying that. I love Jesus, but potentially, yeah, they're experiencing something real, and they're kind of just freaking out, trying whatever they can to like make it go away.
If you call out to the spiritual world, the only thing that's going to respond is something that's from Satan, or an angel if God has sent it. An angel won't act that obeys God, won't act on their own initiative. They're not going to come and answer a human being because you called out to them unless God sent them. The only ones that can act on their own initiative are the ones who rebel against God, and they'll quite happily come if you call out and just open yourself up to them. So unless you're calling out to God.
To God, right? Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
You can send an angel or whatever.
Yeah.
The only ones that can answer on their own initiative are the ones who rebel against God. Because an angel won't do anything on their own initiative. That is still obeying God. So equally, you're only going to get answered by an evil spirit.
Or Samuel. Yeah.
Samuel, God actually sent Samuel in a baptism.
Oh yeah.
But the dead don't. It says clearly that the dead can't communicate with the dead unless.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because he's pretty frustrated. He's like, "You've woken me up." Yeah. No, interesting. So it's 8:00. Sorry, guys. We'll just finish on Psalm 91 and let you go home. Now, on your notes, I've put down from the Met Museum. It's talking about the Baal epic. If you're interested, this story here on your notes near the end is about this is what the Canaanites, a story about the Canaanite gods. So they'll tell you about Baal and El. It's like mildly interesting. If you're not interested, don't bother. But let's finish. I would actually, if anyone here is really into learning and hearing some of these old random stories and mythologies, there is a good podcast called The Oldest Stories, and the guy's quite funny, and he just reads through these old stories and basically translates them. So if you are curious, but let's read Psalm 91. Oh, actually, I think probably one important thing to say about the Baal and El and the Canaanite stuff, because we're not going to do a whole session on this, but one important thing to say is it's very similar to the Babylonian stuff, and some scholars talk about, they think it's just an evolution of the early Sumerian stuff. So there are a lot of similarities where these gods from ancient Sumeria basically are evolved and adapted, in some of these coastal cities and Ugarit and these, and even to a point where the Egyptian gods as well, they think evolved, and the Greeks took on a lot of these gods. So the stuff all just evolved over time and rolled over into the Grecian stuff and into the Roman stuff as well. And some of these pantheon religions and polytheistic religions that had lots of gods would just kind of bring them in. It's like, join the club, you know? Yeah. You worship one of those guys. Yeah, cool, sweet. Yeah. So very, very different. But it's just important to point out with the Canaanite stuff, it's polytheistic. It is pantheon stuff. It is basically there's one god that resides over a pantheon of gods, and then all of these gods in the pantheon get worshipped in different places. And as we saw before, they believed that they would build a statue of their local, essentially like a territorial spirit. You could probably compare it to like a demonic territorial spirit, but it's essentially a territorial spirit in a place where they would worship that thing. Yahweh's not a territorial spirit.
So were they all worshipping out? Like these
Nah.
different territories?
Nah, they would worship their own mini ones. Yeah.
Even their top dude wasn't the same.
Yeah, he was very different. He was different in character. I wrestled with it for a couple of weeks and looked into it, but my conclusion was the best way to describe him is to compare it with Allah from the Muslim faith to God from the Christian faith. Yeah.
So all of it, like you're saying, in the area, they all have their own like gods.
Yeah.
But did they know that they was there somebody above that? So they knew that it was just for their land or just for their whatever you want to call it. Did they know that there was something higher?
Who knows? I mean, I couldn't give you a definitive answer on what they knew or felt, but I think that the evidence points the evidence points to more of a mindset of like interacting with a localized deity to help me win my battle, or whatever. It's not so much like have a relationship with a loving God. It's like go to the temple and barter, as Dr. Michael Heiser said, barter with it. I will give you this if you give me that, if you help me achieve this thing. Very different. Yeah. And it's not like about going to heaven. It's not any of that. It's like help me now do this thing. I want to go conquer that city and kill its inhabitants. Go with me.
Just to kind of keep this in relevance, if you look at Nebuchadnezzar, he is the only person outside of Judaism that actually wrote a chapter in Daniel.
Yeah.
So it's devoted to someone who in due course, through the events that happened to him, and so I recommend you read it very carefully. He spent 7 years as an animal, and then he of course endeavoured to wipe out some Judaism. So the guys into the furnace, and the people stoking the furnace were burnt in the process. And these guys are walking in the furnace with an extra person there, Christ, and they do not even smell a fire when they come out. And he recognized that the God of the Jewish people was supreme God. Not that he was tempted to worship him.
God of all the earth. That's what he says, God of all the earth. He's not God of that city or that region or that village. He is the God of all the earth. Yeah. Or I'll kill you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or you're in the furnace. Yeah.
The Babylonians were the Americans of the day.
Yeah.
They were the ruling force of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's I just want to not hold you guys up over time, so I'm going to finish with reading out Psalm 91. Then we'll officially close, but if you want to stay behind, I can chat with you. Cool? Just don't want to hold anyone out tonight. So, Psalm 91. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. Some scholars think that's talking about a spiritual attack. Okay? Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare. Verse 4, he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. He's protecting you. Number 5, you will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow, like what Apostle Paul talks about, the arrows, the flaming arrows that fly by day. That's a picture of a spiritual or a curse or a demonic attack. You will not fear that because God will protect you. Number 6, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked if you say, the Lord is my refuge, if you make the Most High your dwelling. No harm will overtake you, no disaster will come near your tent, for he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Probably spiritual entities that it's referring to. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble, and I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Or you could say my deliverance. So, I'm not even sure, sorry. Yeah. So that Psalm 91 is the closest that they have to a exorcism, spiritual protection prayer in the Old Testament.
Psalm 91 goes way back, does it? Or
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say so. It's hard to know, eh? Yeah. I'm not sure. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much that you are the one that protects us. You are the one that provides for us. You cover us with your wings. You surround our houses. You surround our bedrooms. You surround our lounges. You surround our hearts. You surround our minds. You cover us, God. And you always have. You always covered your people. And you always wanted to be the one that your people go to. And so, Lord, tonight we are reminded that we don't go to other things. We don't go to other spirits. We don't go to other things out there for help. We can come straight to you. We can have access straight to you. We don't need to go through a medium to get to you. We don't need to go to a golden calf to get to you. We come straight to you, and you answer us, and you protect us, and you minister to us, and you love us. So thank you, God, that you have revealed this in ancient times and in now, that you're close, that you're near, that you're loving, you're faithful. In Jesus' name.
Yeah.
Amen.
Very good. Very good.
Thanks, everyone. I'll turn the stream off, and we can chat if you need a debrief anything.